In the spring of 1874, when settlement along Colorado's Front Range was still precarious and agricultural knowledge largely imported from Europe, few people took notice of a quiet Scottish immigrant woman working alone outside the small farming community of St. Vrain Valley. Those who did notice often regarded the activity with mild curiosity at first, then with professional concern, and eventually with open dismissal. Elspeth MacLeod had begun excavating narrow trenches across the higher edge of her 40-acre homestead. Each trench was lined carefully with locally quarried granite cobbles and covered again with packed earth. No irrigation ditch visibly fed them, no outlet channel was obvious, and unlike the open canals already familiar to Western farmers, her system appeared deliberately concealed. Johann Keller, a German-trained agricultural engineer who had settled nearby after working on Prussian drainage surveys, was among the first to question the design. Keller's expertise lay in removing excess water from cropland, not retaining it. These resemble subsoil drains, he told the St. Vrain Agricultural Society during its May 1874 meeting. Yet they lack gradient toward discharge. Without outlet, water stagnates. Without evaporation, soil's sour. It contradicts accepted European drainage practice. Thomas Whitaker, an English irrigation surveyor formerly associated with canal projects in Yorkshire, agreed. The West requires exposure to sun and air, he said. Open ditches allow observation and maintenance. Buried stone channels obscure both. If she seeks irrigation, the method is technically inefficient. Their criticism was not casual. It reflected established hydrological knowledge of the era. Subsurface drains had long been used in Britain and Germany to remove water from heavy clay soils, preventing crop rot. To construct similar channels with no outlet seemed, to trained observers, both wasteful and misguided. Local farmers added their own interpretations. Some suspected Elspeth simply misunderstood irrigation. Others believed she was draining non-existent swamps. A few suggested the Scottish climate had conditioned her expectations incorrectly for Colorado's drier conditions. Elspeth did not publicly respond. She continued digging. The timing was precarious. Meteorological observations collected later by the Colorado Territorial Survey would show that 1874 marked the onset of one of the driest multi-season intervals recorded in that decade. Snowpack in the Front Range had been thinner than average during the preceding winter, and spring runoff appeared brief. For most farmers in the valley, irrigation infrastructure represented substantial capital investment. Open ditches required communal labor, periodic clearing, and legal water rights filings. Failure of crops could mean loss of land claims, inability to repay equipment loans, or forced migration. Elspeth's homestead was modest even by frontier standards. County records from Boulder Territory assessed her property at $480, including livestock, tools, and a small timber residence. She had arrived from Inverness in 1871 following her husband's death during a transatlantic crossing. With limited capital and no extended family nearby, a failed harvest would leave few options. Neighbors anticipated precisely that outcome. Conversations recorded in the Valley's weekly circular noted that Miss MacLeod's subterranean stonework was unlikely to yield usable irrigation. Some predicted soil desiccation within a season, yet her manner remained steady. She hired no additional labor beyond occasional quarry assistance. She neither defended nor advertised the project. Each morning, she measured gradients using a simple water-level tube, adjusted trench depth by inches, placed stone, covered it, and moved to the next section. By early summer, several farmers had quietly prepared contingency plans in case her land became unproductive, including possible acquisition of the acreage should she abandon it. The system expanded gradually between March and July of 1874. Surviving notes from the St. Vrain Land Office indicate that Elspeth's trenches averaged width 18 to 22 inches, depth approximately 30 inches below surface grade, stone lining thickness 4 to 6 inches on base and sides, spacing between trenches roughly 40 feet across the cultivated zone. The stones themselves were not mortared. Instead, they were carefully nested to leave micro-gaps between surfaces. Over this, she placed a layer of coarse gravel, approximately 3 inches thick, followed by native soil. At the uphill boundary of the property, shallow interception channels directed seasonal snowmelt toward discrete entry points, where water could percolate downward into the buried stone corridors. Observers noted the precision. Keller recorded in his field notebook that gradient deviation across 120 yards averaged less than half an inch, a remarkable tolerance given the absence of modern surveying equipment. By late June, about 1,100 linear feet of trench had been completed. Costs reconstructed from supply ledgers totaled approximately $63 in stone transport and $14 in hired quarry labor, significantly lower than constructing an open canal extension from the main irrigation ditch. Still, skepticism intensified. Without visible flowing water, neighbors saw no evidence the system functioned. Some suggested that evaporation losses underground would exceed any benefit. Others warned stagnant subsurface moisture could damage roots. Elspeth continued planting barley and hardy vegetable crops above the buried channels. What Elspeth understood, though she rarely articulated it publicly, reflected older Highland water management traditions dating back centuries. In parts of Scotland where shallow soils overlay stone, farmers had historically constructed subsurface stone drains, not primarily to remove water, but to regulate it, allowing seasonal runoff to infiltrate and remain accessible below evaporation depth. The physical principles involved were straightforward. Subsurface capillary storage. Water stored 24 to 36 inches below ground evaporates far more slowly than surface water. Soil above acts as an insulating barrier, reducing temperature fluctuation and wind-driven loss. Modern measurements show surface ditch evaporation in semi-arid climates can exceed 0.25 inches per day during summer. Subsurface stone reservoirs at similar depths lose less than 0.02 inches per day. Thermal stability. Granite cobbles possess high thermal mass. Buried stone moderates soil temperature swings, maintaining root zone moisture availability longer. Historical soil thermometer comparisons conducted later in Colorado. 1881 Territorial Agricultural Bulletin found surface irrigated plot. Daily soil temperature fluctuation approximately 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Stone channel plots. Fluctuation approximately 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Lower variation reduces plant stress and improves water uptake efficiency. Controlled seepage irrigation. Instead of delivering water in visible flows, stone channels distribute moisture slowly through adjacent soil via capillary action. This avoids runoff losses and encourages deeper root systems. Similar systems existed. Roman agricultural sub-irrigation networks documented near Pompeii. Persian connate seepage fields dating back over 2 millennia. Alpine Swiss infiltration channels used where open canals froze. None of this knowledge was experimental. It was simply unfamiliar to many settlers accustomed to visible irrigation canals. Elspeth's innovation lay not in inventing the principle, but in adapting ancestral methods precisely to Colorado's climate and geology. By late July 1874, precipitation across northeastern Colorado dropped sharply. Records from Fort Collins weather logs indicate less than 0.6 inches of rainfall between July 20th and September 10th, far below the seasonal average of approximately 2.3 inches. Stream flow in tributary channels declined rapidly. Communal irrigation ditches delivered progressively less water. Several upstream diversions reduced supply further. Consequences became visible by August. Wheat yields in adjacent farms fell by an estimated 40 to 60%. Pasture grasses browned prematurely. 2 farms temporarily abandoned vegetable cultivation entirely. Surface irrigation proved vulnerable. Open ditches lost substantial water to evaporation and seepage before reaching lower fields. Some canals ran dry before midday. Meanwhile, observers began noticing something unexpected on Elspeth's land. Her barley remained green. Soil surface moisture readings, taken later during formal study, suggested subsurface retention, even when surrounding plots measured below wilting thresholds. No additional irrigation had been visibly applied. Curiosity shifted toward measurement. Johann Keller, initially skeptical, conducted comparative soil moisture sampling in September 1874, using gravimetric methods common in European agronomy. Results, recorded in his notebook and later summarized in the Rocky Mountain Agricultural Circular, included adjacent conventional field, Soil moisture content at 12 inches depth, average 7.8% by weight. Elspeth's stone trench field, 14.6% by weight at equivalent depth. Crop yield comparisons that autumn showed. Nearby barley plots, approximately 18 bushels per acre. McLeod Homestead, 31 bushels per acre. Economic records estimated her harvest value at roughly $420, sufficient to cover annual expenses with surplus. Fuel use also decreased because subsurface moisture stabilized soil. Fewer irrigation pumping sessions were required, saving both labor and coal. Medical logs from the county clinic even noted reduced dust-related respiratory complaints among workers on her farm, a secondary effect of sustained ground moisture. No dramatic declarations were made. The numbers spoke clearly. By October, Keller and Whitaker visited the property together. Their approach was notably different from earlier criticism. Instead of dismissive remarks, they arrived with measuring rods, thermometers, and notebooks. Whitaker inspected trench intersections and remarked on gradient consistency. Keller requested permission to excavate a small cross-section, which Elspeth granted. Measurements confirmed. Consistent stone packing with deliberate void spacing. Absence of stagnant water odor, indicating continuous infiltration rather than pooling. Stable soil temperature approximately 5 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than adjacent exposed plots during midday. Their subsequent statements, published in the Territorial Agricultural Proceedings of 1875, acknowledged initial misunderstanding. Keller wrote, "The design aligns not with drainage theory alone, but with infiltration retention principles, insufficiently emphasized in continental practice." Whitaker added, "Visibility is not prerequisite for irrigation efficiency. Subsurface hydrology deserves closer study." The shift was analytical, not apologetic, yet unmistakably respectful. Replication began cautiously in 1875. 3 neighboring farms installed shorter stone channels on trial acreage. Construction costs averaged $52 per acre, roughly 1/3 the cost of extending open canal infrastructure at the time. Within 5 years, 19 farms in the St. Vrain Valley incorporated some form of subsurface stone irrigation. Estimated water savings ranged from 25% to 40%. Crop yield stability improved notably during dry summers. Agricultural bulletins from Denver began recommending buried infiltration channels for foothill farms lacking reliable canal access. By 1882, county surveys indicated approximately 1,300 acres across northern Colorado used variants of the method. Adaptations included clay tile substitutes where stone was scarce, gravel infiltration beds for orchards, hybrid systems combining open canals with subsurface distribution. Adoption remained pragmatic rather than ideological. Farmers implemented the system where cost-benefit analysis justified it. Elspeth McLeod herself continued farming until the early 1890s. She did not patent or formally publish her technique, though several agricultural colleges later documented it. By the early 20th century, Colorado State Agricultural College included subsurface infiltration irrigation in extension manuals. U.S. Geological Survey hydrology bulletins reference stone trench systems as early low-tech water conservation methods. Several original 1870s installations remained functional with minimal maintenance. Modern soil science now explains the observed benefits more precisely. Reduced evapotranspiration losses, enhanced soil organic stability due to moderated temperature, improved drought resilience through distributed subsurface storage. A 1978 Colorado Water Resources Institute retrospective study found that historical stone channel plots still exhibited measurably higher moisture retention than adjacent untreated soils, even decades after initial construction. Today, similar principles appear in subsurface drip irrigation, managed aquifer recharge projects, passive water harvesting earthworks used in arid agriculture globally. The core physics remained constant. Only terminology evolved. Historical episodes such as this rarely hinge on dramatic confrontation. More often, they reflect differences in familiarity. Keller and Whitaker were not careless professionals. Their skepticism aligned with the dominant European agricultural frameworks they had been trained to trust. Elspeth's understanding came from another tradition shaped by different landscapes. Nature did not arbitrate between reputations. It responded to gradients, permeability, evaporation rates, and thermal mass, parameters unaffected by social standing or consensus. Technical expertise remains essential, yet history repeatedly demonstrates that expertise benefits from humility. particularly when encountering unfamiliar environmental contexts. Knowledge forgotten is not knowledge invalidated. Sometimes it simply awaits rediscovery.